During the 90s and early 2000s, many people consider that time of NASCAR to be the golden age. Many major companies wanted to get their brand or brands on a car that would go really fast. Today, a sponsor we'll talk about comes from a major media conglomerate, that being Turner Broadcasting. This company runs TBS, TNT, CNN, truTV, Adult Swim, and what we'll talk about today, Cartoon Network. Back when there were a lot of good shows. I picked this one because I grew up watching all sorts of shows from Cartoon Network. While I did watch some Nick shows, of course, I was always a Cartoon Network kid. During the late 90s, it went from being a program block on TNT airing classics like the Jetsons, Flintstones, and Looney Tunes to becoming the first full 24-hour single-genre network for animations. Especially when you go back 20 to 25 years ago, this was during the rise of cable television and the World Wide Web. Today, we have so many channels that can fit any demographic at this point, and during that rise, a lot of those brands wanted to get on a stock car. So, how did Cartoon Network get into NASCAR? Well, we're going to go all the way back to 1997. Cartoon Network ended up on the number 29 Chevrolet for Robert Pressley driving for Diamond Ridge Motorsports. Pressley would drive this car for the first 10 races of the season, but then would suddenly get fired from the ride. During those first 10 races, Pressley scored a best finish of 14th at Bristol, and he did DNQ 3 races as well. Later in the season, Pressley would end up finishing the season with Jasper Racing. Just a quick edit, by the way, after Pressley got fired from the 29 car, Jeff Green would end up taking over the car for the rest of the season. I actually do have a diecast of that 29 car. Fun fact, and I'll leave a couple links to the description down below, but during 1997, Cartoon Network would actually air NASCAR promos when they sponsored a car. One being with Robert Pressley actually giving the cartoon characters a ride around the track. For example, Johnny Bravo can be heard literally screaming his voice off as the car roars around the track, and of course Robert Pressley yeeting Dexter out of his car with a big button that Dee Dee pointed out. This was also a promotion called Team Wacky Racing, of course promoted by a very popular Wacky Races character.
Dick.
That's right, I'm talking about Dick Dastardly. There's actually a commercial where Dastardly actually talks about Cartoon Network sponsoring a car, which is pretty cool having just a typical cartoon character talk to you about NASCAR. At least for me anyway. The next year in 1998, Cartoon Network moved over to Melling Racing in the number 9 Ford to help the team return to full-time racing with Lake Speed behind the wheel. This time, the team ran different kinds of Cartoon Network paint schemes representing different Cartoon Network characters and shows, such as Scooby-Doo and Tom and Jerry. Lake Speed would go on to have his best finish in the number 9 that season, being in the season opener in the Daytona 500. Midway through the season at Sonoma, Lake Speed was involved in a wreck and had to be replaced by Butch Gillen that weekend while he recovered. That next week at New Hampshire, Lake Speed returned for one last race and retired from racing. He was replaced immediately by rookie Jerry Nadeau, who was driving the number 13 for Bill Elliott and Dan Marino. Yep, that Dan Marino. He went on to have a best finish of 15th at Watkins Glen International, and Nadeau would return to the team for the 1999 season, with Turner Broadcasting taking a larger role in its sponsorship duties, advertising TBS, Dinner and a Movie, WCW, and the Atlanta Braves in the addition to their Cartoon Network sponsorship. Unfortunately, midway through the season, the owner of the team, Harry Melling, passed away from a heart attack, and his son Mark took over ownership of the team. At Watkins Glen that season, Nadeau gave Melling Racing its first top 5 since 1991 with a 5th place finish. However, he left after the following week to replace Ernie Irvin at NB2 Motorsports. For the rest of the season, Rich Bickle, Steve Grissom, and Stacy Compton all split the ride. Then in 2000, Turner Broadcasting took their sponsorship and moved over to the new team, Galaxy Motorsports, in the number 75 Ford that was driven by Wally Dallenbach Jr. I actually might do another video on this team because this one's actually rather interesting, and this car would be sponsored the entire season by Turner Broadcasting. Dallenbach would only go on to score one top 10 the entire season, coming from Watkins Glen. He would also DNQ 4 races in 2000. In the end though, Galaxy Motorsports was in a mess. They were struggling financially, and pretty much this quickly led to its downfall and pretty much the end of Wally Dallenbach's racing career, as he would move into the NBC TNT booth for NASCAR broadcasting. TNT actually went on to call NASCAR races on and off pretty much from the early 2000s all the way until 2014. And that pretty much wraps up Cartoon Network's history of sponsoring a NASCAR stock car. Although it also kind of doesn't stop there. There were other Cartoon Network shows on and off that premiered on NASCAR stock cars. For example, when I went to the 2005 Sharpie 500, Kyle Busch actually drove a Johnny Bravo themed car, while Brian Vickers drove a Scooby-Doo Chevrolet as well. Heck, even just last year, Corey LaJoie even drove a Scooby-Doo themed car himself. And don't get me started on how many times we've seen Nickelodeon come on cars as well, such as the SpongeBob SquarePants movie in 2004, and even at one point not that long ago, there was a race called the SpongeBob SquarePants 400 that had SpongeBob themed race cars. Besides that, I think it's really cool that, brands like Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and even more youth-oriented brands wanted to associate themselves in NASCAR. I think it's able to attract a younger audience if it's done right. So what do you guys think? What paint schemes did you like of Cartoon Network's time in NASCAR, or even Turner Broadcasting's for that matter? Just imagine in later years seeing shows like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, or even later on like Adventure Time and Steven Universe being on a stock car. Kind of gives me an idea or two. But besides that, that pretty much wraps up this video here. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and by the way, with Sunday Night Lights, that prologue is still being worked on. I have lost some motivation. I've just been down in the dumps lately, but I do promise that will get worked on. It will come out. Just give me time. It will come out. And thank you so much once again for watching. I know things are crazy right now, so please stay safe, be careful, and I will see you all in the next video.